A storm rages as a colossal bolt of lightning crashes down, illuminating a lone figure at its center. This man is the legendary Fist King, a title earned by conquering the martial world with his bare hands. He is a warrior so renowned that his title is spoken far more often than his actual name. But today, the Fist King Dan Wusung is exhausted and clutching his head in pain. Despite his fierce determination, he's struggling against a severe injury to his arm. He was caught in a deadly ambush, surrounded by a mysterious group of assailants. Even so, he has systematically taken down almost every one of his attackers. The ground below is now littered with the defeated forms of those who challenged him. His attention turns to a cliff above, where the final two orchestrators of the attack remain. A smug swordsman and a woman with a fan look down, appearing to be the masterminds behind it all. The Fist King assesses his final two opponents, recognizing their skill and questioning their origins. In a defiant gesture, he hurls one of their defeated subordinates back up the cliff. The terrified man pleads for his life, calling out to the swordsman by the title Sword Demon. The Sword Demon, however, responds by mercilessly cutting down his own subordinate. Dan Wusung watches from below as the body is callously discarded from the cliff. He's shocked by the swordsman's cold-blooded decision to eliminate his own ally without hesitation. This proves his opponent is not just a master, but a ruthless fighter who follows no code of honor. His attention is drawn to a distinctive tag hanging from the hilt of the swordsman's blade. The combination of the symbol and the man's cruelty triggers a sudden, chilling realization. Dan Wusung glares at them, finally identifying his ambushers as part of the dreaded demonic faction. The Sword Demon lands on the cliff, mockingly complimenting the Fist King's endurance. He condescendingly praises the warrior's tenacity, but Dan Wusung cuts him off with a glare. Despite his injuries, the Fist King boldly vows to finish this fight in just 10 attacks. The Sword Demon scoffs at this declaration, amused by his opponent's supposed arrogance. He launches into action, sending a wave of deadly energy slashes down at the Fist King. Dan Wusung counters instantly, his lightning-infused fists shattering the demonic energy. In a flash of blue light, the Fist King closes the gap, stunning the Sword Demon with his incredible speed. He lands the first devastating blow, marking the beginning of his 10-move countdown. A confident smirk appears as he charges his next attack, calmly counting the second strike. Dan Wusung unleashes a furious volley of punches, rapidly counting each brutal impact up to 6. As he counts to 9, he realizes his attacks are deliberately missing their mark. His gaze shifts to the cliff, identifying the woman's purple energy as the source of the interference. The Fist King glares, understanding she has been subtly manipulating the fight all along. Exploiting this momentary distraction, the Sword Demon lands a devastating strike. Dan Wusung staggers back, wounded by the treacherous, well-timed blow. The Sword Demon leans in, certain he has finally brought the legendary warrior's reign to an end. His confident expression shatters into disbelief as he realizes his fatal mistake. The Fist King has caught the blade, his other hand crackling with immense power as he grabs his foe. With his final move, he channels all his remaining energy into the ground, creating a massive explosion. The Sword Demon reappears from the dust, now bearing a new scar and a look of cold fury. The Sword Demon laughs, mockingly acknowledging the Fist King's impressive fighting prowess. The massive chasm carved by the explosion now separates the victors from the vanquished legend. His female accomplice smirks, reminding him that her interference was crucial to his survival. The swordsman leans over the fallen warrior, preparing to deliver a final taunting remark. But the Fist King's fist suddenly rockets upward, catching the arrogant villain completely off guard. With a final surge of will, Dan Wusung lands his promised 10th and final blow. As his strength finally fades, the Fist King accepts that his legendary reign is over. His consciousness begins to slip away, his body finally succumbing to his fatal injuries. A single regret fills his mind, the wish that he could have landed just one more solid hit. And so, the legendary Fist King Dan Wusung meets his end, his life extinguished by the demonic faction. The story shifts to a tranquil safe house on Juhua Mountain, a stark contrast to the previous battlefield. A mysterious crow observes from a window as a young woman tends to someone inside. Suddenly, a man's eyes snap open, his mind reeling with shock and confusion. The young woman leans over him with concern, checking if the master of the house is finally awake. Now fully conscious, he looks at the unfamiliar woman and wonders where he is. He glances around the pristine room, questioning who could have treated his fatal wounds. As he tries to sit up, a sharp pain pierces his head, causing the woman to rush to his side. He checks his body in disbelief, finding it completely unharmed as the woman addresses him as First Young Master. While accepting a drink, he internally questions the unfamiliar title she has called him. He looks into a mirror only to see a stranger's face, finally understanding he has been reborn in another's body. He stares into the cup, his mind racing to comprehend the impossible situation he's in. The woman's sudden, cheerful pat on the back jolts him from his thoughts. In a frantic denial, he desperately pulls at his cheeks, convinced he's wearing a mask. The horrifying realization dawns on him as he feels only skin. This is his real face now. Defeated, he collapses onto the desk, unable to process the loss of his old identity. His panicked state is mistaken for a fever, prompting the concerned woman to fetch a doctor. He examines his unfamiliar hands, a stark reminder that his legendary fists are gone. The attendant quietly exits, thinking her master's behavior is more bizarre than usual. He rules out the demonic faction's involvement, knowing such godlike power is beyond even them. Staring at his reflection, he's left with one burning question. Just who was this young man? He decides to investigate his new circumstances. He tests the physical capabilities of his new body. He struggles with the unfamiliar weakness he now feels. He expresses his disdain for the body's frailty. He declares the body utterly useless for his purposes. He notices a document bearing a familiar name. He recalls the Yuna merchant group near Juhua Mountain. He realizes the group's significant influence and wealth. He discovers the recipient of the document. He learns his new identity, Li Jinian, the eldest son. He scoffs in disgust, piecing together from the letters that his new body belonged to a total wastrel. This isn't sorcery or a mask, as he feels no unusual energy within the body. The impossible idea of reincarnation finally dawns on him, his former self a lingering memory. Slumping at his desk, he dismisses the absurd thought, believing he simply lost his mind. His contemplation is shattered by a frantic voice calling for the first young master. An elderly physician bursts in, anxiously checking on him and revealing his identity as Gongsun Myung. The Fist King recoils in annoyance, having absolutely no idea who this frantic old man is. The physician expresses immense relief, explaining he rushed over after hearing of his master's odd behavior. Without waiting for a response, the old man begins to check his pulse to diagnose the problem. Dan Wusung curtly pulls his arm away, assuring the overly concerned physician that he is perfectly fine. The physician dismisses his concerns and orders a meal to be brought in for the young master. A steaming bowl of chicken soup is presented, supposedly to help restore his strength. Dan Wusung smirks, realizing this seemingly helpful meal is actually harmful to the original owner of this body. He connects the dots, suspecting the physician's attempt to check his pulse was a test of his sudden recovery. The physician's snake-like smile confirms his ill intentions as he pushes the soup on him. To gauge the passage of time, he casually asks about the history of a famous martial arts competition. After getting his answer, he coolly declines the meal, claiming he's not hungry. He firmly dismisses the flustered physician, telling the old man to leave him be. Alone, he breathes a sigh of relief, calculating that not much time has passed since his demise. A sense of renewed hope fills him as he ties back his hair, ready to face his new reality. He reasons that his old foes, the demonic faction, must also still be lurking somewhere. His thoughts then turn to the scheming physician, another person he's eager to discipline. He cracks his knuckles with a grim smile, silently promising a harsh lesson to his newfound adversaries. He resolves to reclaim his former glory, intending to end his foes with a single punch. His vengeful thoughts are momentarily forgotten at the sight of a grand breakfast spread. The attendants marvel at his newfound appetite, a stark change from his previous weak state. He returns from his morning exercise, already pushing the limits of his new physical form. He confidently walks in, surprising the attendants as he moves to inspect his breakfast. He calmly instructs the attendants to simplify his meals going forward, asserting his new authority. As he walks away, the attendants whisper in amazement, remarking on his remarkable recovery and changed demeanor. He calmly eats his meal, anticipating the arrival of the physician, Gongsun Myung. His meal is interrupted by the physician's call, and he irritably grants him entry. The old physician shuffles in, his face a mask of grim displeasure. Dan Wusung smirks, amused by the man's initial rudeness. The physician's demeanor flips instantly, becoming overly eager and fawning. He questions the old man's motives, puzzled by his groveling behavior. A predatory grin spreads across his face as he decides to unmask this scheming rat. He coolly questions the physician's purpose for visiting, putting the flustered man on the spot. The physician claims loneliness drove him here, complaining that his previous efforts now seem wasted. Dan Wusung's interest is piqued by the mention of effort, sensing a confession is near. He smirks, directly identifying the physician's effort as an attempt to serve him dragon phoenix soup. The old man is completely blindsided by this sudden and accurate accusation. Gongsun Myung quickly recovers, trying to pass off the potent soup as a simple misunderstanding. Dan Wusung plays along, sarcastically remarking that he had mistaken the tonic for poison. Outraged, the physician puffs up his chest, reminding the young master of his loyal service. Feigning offense, Gongsun Myung makes a show of taking his leave since he is clearly not welcome. Dan Wusung calmly calls out to the physician, stopping the old man in his tracks. His gaze turns cold as he questions whether the physician thinks he is the master of the house. The physician flinches, finally feeling the immense weight of the young master's newfound authority. Dan Wusung suddenly lightens the mood, dismissing his threat as a joke and leaving the physician to laugh nervously. He commands the physician to fetch writing tools, intending to send a letter. While eating, he orders the old man to act as his scribe and write what he dictates. He begins the letter, citing the severe illness of Li Jinian as the reason for his extended stay. The physician's face darkens as he's forced to write a veiled threat asking for advice on what to do next. Noticing the man's hesitation, he coldly asks why the pen has stopped moving. The physician laughs nervously, feigning confusion at the young master's strange words. With a flick of his wrist, he sends a chopstick flying past the old man's head and into the wall. The terrified physician clutches his neck, a fresh scratch, a testament to the young master's deadly precision. His gaze turns icy as he declares that the weak Li Jinian the physician knew is gone forever. The physician stammers in pure terror, finally realizing he is no longer dealing with a helpless boy. He calmly begins to lecture the physician about the dragon phoenix soup he was served. He explains that while the soup is a tonic for the healthy, it has a very different effect on the sick. Lifting the bowl, he declares that for someone as ill as he was, the tonic was nothing short of poison. A flashback reveals the physician's smug satisfaction, believing the soup would disrupt the young master's energy. He calls out the physician for secretly checking his pulse when the initial attempt failed. With a bored expression, he holds his spoon, ready to deliver the final blow to the man's deception. He recalls the moment he dismissed everyone, refusing to consume the dangerous meal. His sharp gaze pins the physician as he accuses the old man of failing to hide his murderous intent. The physician's face contorts with rage and fear, his entire scheme now completely unraveled. Concluding the physician couldn't have acted alone, he commands the man to write down his accomplice's name. The physician plays the victim, questioning how anyone could suspect such a kind soul. Dan Wusung watches with cold amusement as the old man puts on a show of exasperation. The physician's kind mask shatters, revealing a malevolent sneer as he drops all pretense. Unfazed, the young master notes that the old man has finally revealed his true, foolish nature. Cornered, the physician decides his only option is to eliminate all witnesses in the house. He brandishes a hidden needle, preparing to silence the young master permanently. But before he can make a move, Dan Wusung strikes with blinding speed. The physician is sent reeling from a powerful blow to the face, his plan instantly foiled. Casually picking up his food, the young master chides the dazed man for losing focus. He takes a defiant bite, his cold gaze demanding the physician's complete and undivided attention. He nurses his bruised knuckles, lamenting the pitiful state of his current body. His hand tightens into a fist as he resolves to recover his strength with urgency. He vows that once at full power, not even the entire merchant group can stand against him. He plans to thoroughly investigate the physician's connections upon his return to the group. But as he sits, a sharp pain suddenly lances through his head. He grips his temple, completely blindsided by the sudden and intense headache. His eyes widen as a phantom voice urgently calls out from within his mind. An image of a stern-faced Gongsun Myung materializes, his name echoing with significance. The vision shifts, revealing a past encounter between the physician and the body's original owner. He's overwhelmed by a flood of fragmented images, realizing he is experiencing the memories of Li Jinian. The fragmented memories settle like ripples in water, bringing a sudden, profound understanding. He now fully grasps the identity of this body. Li Jinian, first son of the Unha merchant group. Overshadowed by his siblings, he was neither as smart as his second brother, nor as strong as his third. The memories confirm he was viewed as nothing more than the inadequate eldest son. He tried to fill the void with wealth, spiraling into a depraved life of meaningless pleasure. A moment of clarity reveals the original owner's deep regret for his past mistakes. But his realization came too late, his body already broken from years of neglect. This villa was not a retreat, but a place of exile, where his family had abandoned him to fade away. Dan Wusung considers how difficult it was to act without knowing this crucial backstory. Now armed with the truth, he can finally focus on the one thing that matters, regaining his power. He laments how Li Jinian wasted such a naturally gifted body. A sudden thought stops him cold, his fingers twitching with realization. His gaze drifts to the piles of gold, sparking an idea about acquiring elixirs. He begrudgingly admits that with this body's immense wealth, nothing is out of his reach. Before any plans can be made, he turns his attention to the problem of the dead physician. The scenery shifts, indicating a significant passage of time. The villa settles into a period of quiet training and recovery. A full year passes in peaceful seclusion. This tranquility is shattered by the arrival of a blindfolded stranger at the gate. The man identifies himself as a guard from the Yunha merchant group, carrying a letter for Li Jinian. A young woman spots her target, pointing him out to her stern-faced companion. The guard stares in disbelief, unable to process the sight of the man meditating before him. He struggles to reconcile this powerful figure with the weak, frail young master Li Jinian he once knew. The narrative flashes back, showing that several seasons have passed since his recovery began. During his seclusion, he successfully manifested his energy core, engraving essential martial arts onto his new vessel. He mastered several techniques, including the enlightened mobility art, a powerful body art, and the lightning-fast rapid stride. Most impressively, he began mastering the white lightning 10-phase art, already reaching the 4th phase of its power. With his training proceeding perfectly, he sits with an air of absolute confidence in his recovered strength. His meditation is broken as he whips around, launching a precise kick at a single falling leaf. The leaf flutters down, now perfectly sliced in two, a testament to his newfound speed and control. The single leaf isn't just split in two, but perfectly trisected by his lightning-fast kick. Yet he remains unimpressed, knowing this level of power is still not enough. His concentration is broken by a voice calling out the name of his new identity. The guard Mok Insiop formally introduces himself, still visibly reeling from the young master's transformation. He bows deeply, announcing he carries an important letter from the main clan. Dan Wusung rises, confidently demanding the guard hand over the message. The guard's mind flashes back to the weak, frail man he once knew, struggling to comprehend the dramatic change. After being ignored, the guard complains about his arm, snapping Dan Wusung out of his thoughts. They sit down together as Dan Wusung finally begins to read the urgent message. The letter delivers grim news. His father, the merchant group's leader, has collapsed and is now bedridden. He notes with suspicion that the letter conveniently omits the cause of his father's illness. The guard begins to explain the grim reality behind the leader's collapse. He reveals the culprit is the Ouyang clan, a rival group extorting them. The so-called protection fees have skyrocketed, crushing the Yuna merchant group under their weight. Dan Wusung questions what, if anything, the Ouyang clan has done to justify their increasing demands. The guard erupts in fury, declaring the Ouyang clan has offered no protection whatsoever. He recounts a recent incident where the little deity sect imposed ridiculous taxes on their trade routes. When asked for help, the Ouyang clan simply turned their backs, refusing to intervene. The Yuna guard captain was powerless to protest, intimidated by a man named Uang Hu. The name resonates with Dan Wusung, who recognizes Uang Hu as a formidable and infamous figure. Dan Wusung smirks, asking if simply dealing with the Ouyang clan will resolve all their problems. The guard hesitates, revealing there's another crucial reason behind the leader's collapse. He explains that the second and third brothers had a sword fight right in front of their father. Dan Wusung correctly deduces that his father collapsed from the sheer anger of witnessing his son's reckless behavior. The guard grows frantic, lamenting the brother's disrespect while trying to convince Dan Wusung to stay out of it. With a sharp, determined gaze, Dan Wusung decides he can no longer remain a passive observer. He rises abruptly, telling the stunned guard to keep the letter, as he no longer needs it. With newfound purpose, he strides past the bewildered guard, ready to take action. His face set with resolve, Dan Wusung declares that he will go to the main clan himself. The guard slams his hand on the table in astonishment, realizing the weak young master he knew is truly gone. The guard rushes back to his comrades, excitedly recounting how the young master has become a perfect martial artist. His superior, the vice captain, listens from the side with a look of pure skepticism. The other guards erupt in laughter, unable to believe the infamous good-for-nothing could be a martial artist. They mock the claim, sarcastically suggesting that if the scoundrel is a martial artist, then anyone can be a legend. One guard dismisses the story as a terrible joke, quipping it's less believable than the vice captain finding a lover. Unseen by the Joker, the vice captain looms behind him, his expression turning dangerously dark at the personal jab. The vice captain, Han Yeop, grabs the disrespectful guard by the head, calmly accepting the news of the young master's recovery. He reflects on the past, recalling that Jinyeon always had a naturally fine physique, even as a child. Han Yeop tightens his grip, demanding to know when the young master will arrive, while the messenger stammers that he's on his way. The messenger's words catch in his throat as he realizes on his way means right at this very moment. The vice captain silences a complaining guard, reminding the squad that they must greet the young master, regardless of his reputation. At that very moment, Dan Woo-sung arrives, standing before the grand entrance of his family's headquarters. He takes in the sheer scale of the estate, realizing the immense wealth his family commands. The sight confirms his suspicions. Lee Jinyeon wasn't just well off, he was born into staggering fortune. Dismissing his 2 female attendants, he instructs them to rest while he goes to see his father immediately. As he walks through the sprawling estate, a strange detail begins to bother him. His brow furrows as he realizes the grounds are empty, questioning why there's no welcoming party for the returning young master. His gaze narrows with sudden awareness, sensing multiple figures just out of sight. A voice congratulates him on his safe return, and he looks up to find himself faced with a line of unsheathed swords. The vice captain, Han Yeop, formally introduces himself, revealing the intimidating welcome is from the entire guard squad. Han Yeop remarks on the young master's almost unrecognizable transformation. He expresses relief at seeing him healthy, while another guard silently questions his captain's sudden deference. The guard recalls how the vice captain was always looked down upon by the old arrogant Jinyeon. As the guard tries to intervene, Dan Woo-sung calmly stops him, exuding an aura of complete control. Dan Woo-sung wryly accepts their intimidating welcome, thanking them with a disarming smile. The guards are left speechless by his unexpected composure as Han Yeop offers to escort him. The entire squad is thrown into disbelief, unable to process being greeted by the formerly worthless young master. The messenger guard admits that even he is shocked by the extent of the change, feeling like a stranger in his own home. Han Yeop observes the new young master with a look of growing respect and intrigue. He concludes that Dan Woo-sung now feels less like a liability and more like a powerful ally. Han Yeop informs Dan Woo-sung that his father is expecting him, and Dan Woo-sung gives a curt nod of thanks. As they walk, a mocking voice rings out, and Dan Woo-sung turns to see one of his brothers approaching. The man makes a show of surprise, acting as if he can't believe his eyes. He brazenly places a hand on Dan Woo-sung's shoulder, who glares at the unwelcome touch. This is Lee Jae-yeon, the third brother, who greets him with a smug, insulting smirk. Jae-yeon remarks with feigned surprise that Dan Woo-sung's new expression makes him almost unrecognizable. With a sharp move, Dan Woo-sung shoves his brother's hand away, his eyes filled with cold fury. Han Yeop watches nervously, remembering past altercations and fearing the young master is about to be beaten again. Just then, the second brother appears, grabbing both their hands and sarcastically remarking on their touching reunion. Dan Woo-sung explodes, forcefully throwing both of his brothers back, demanding they keep their hands off him. The second brother is left stunned and speechless by Dan Woo-sung's sudden show of force. Meanwhile, the third brother, Jae-yeon, seethes with rage, furious at being defied by the family's good-for-nothing. Dan Woo-sung's gaze turns icy as he prepares to deliver a harsh lesson in respect. Before Jae-yeon can finish his taunt, Dan Woo-sung swiftly grabs him by the face. Without a moment's hesitation, he lands a devastating punch squarely on his brother's jaw. The force of the blow sends Jae-yeon's head snapping back, drawing blood. The second brother can only watch in disbelief as Jae-yeon staggers back, completely overwhelmed. Dan Woo-sung closes the distance again, grabbing his terrified brother who babbles about his earlier excitement. His grip tightens mercilessly, a dark aura radiating from him as Jae-yeon's face contorts in pain. With brutal efficiency, Dan Woo-sung slams his brother's face toward the ground, silencing his insults with pure dominance. Dan Woo-sung leans in, coldly reminding his brother of the proper way to address him. Just then, a door slides open nearby, drawing attention away from the confrontation. The second brother, Hwa-yeon, steps out, wondering what all the noise is about. The second son, Hwa-yeon, realizes with alarm that the commotion is right outside their father's room. The vice captain quickly informs Hwa-yeon that his brothers are in the middle of a heated argument. Hua Yan instantly assumes the third brother must be harassing the first one yet again. Panicked, he scolds the guards for not intervening to protect his older brother. But before anyone can act, Dan Wusung shoves open the door, dragging his brother inside and demanding silence. As Jae-yeon struggles in his grip, a calm voice from inside the room addresses the second brother. Hua Yan is left completely speechless, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding before him. Inside, their father sits calmly at a table, observing the chaotic scene with an unreadable expression. He calmly acknowledges his son's return, his smile holding a hint of amusement. The father notes Dan Wusung's improved health, seemingly unbothered by his other son struggling on the floor. Dan Wusung confirms his well-being with a steely gaze, his demeanor completely transformed. His father's eyes then fall on Dan Wusung's bandaged hand, questioning if the third brother caused the injury. Dan Wusung quickly dismisses the concern, waving it off as nothing while his brother looks on in terror. He then delivers another brutal strike, a clear message about the new hierarchy. With a menacing aura, he coldly schools Jae-yeon on the consequences of disrespect, a lesson the terrified brother quickly accepts. Jae-yeon is left utterly humiliated, forced to bow his head in submission. But beneath the submission, Jae-yeon's mind seethes with rage, unable to accept being overpowered by the family's former disgrace. Jae-yeon's mind flashes back to the past, recalling how he used to be the one tormenting his now dominant brother. The second brother, Hwa-yeon, is equally stunned, remembering how Jin-yeon's greatest achievement was merely surviving Ja-yeon's abuse. Their father calmly questions the source of Dan Wusung's transformation, who coolly acknowledges his father's sharp perception. Dan Wusung's gaze then shifts, landing on a set of scrolls laid out on the table. His father explains the scrolls are a list of employees slated for an upcoming conference. Dan Wusung unrolls the list, his focus immediately zeroing in on the names. He reveals he was looking for a specific recommendation, but now sees the truth laid bare. The name Uang Hu is revealed as the mastermind behind the personnel choices, confirming a deep-seated conspiracy. Having found the answer he sought, Dan Wusung places the scroll down with quiet finality. He then issues a chilling ultimatum, demanding any of his family working with the Uyang clan to confess immediately. Hwa-yeon is stunned by the accusation, while Jae-yeon comically cheers in the background, denying any involvement. Dan Wusung's lips curl into a slight sneer as he begins to test his brother's loyalty. Hwa-yeon erupts, finding the very idea of betraying their family completely ridiculous. Both brothers passionately pledge their allegiance, vowing to protect their father's legacy at all costs. Dan Wusung expresses his satisfaction, coolly stating their loyalty has spared them a grim fate. He then pivots, questioning Hwa-yeon about the attendance of the company's top executives at the upcoming conference. With a determined look, Dan Wusung declares that he will be present at the meeting as well. He turns to leave, informing his bewildered brothers that he is going to see their father again. A sudden realization dawns on Hwa-yeon, who anxiously asks about the events that transpired at the safe house. The brothers spiral into a panic, with Jae-yeon dramatically regretting not being at Juhwa Mountain instead. A guard announces the eldest son has arrived, and a voice from within grants him entry. Dan Wusung steps into the private chambers of the Yunha Merchant Group's leader. The ailing leader, Lee Seongmin, lies in bed and acknowledges his visitor's presence. When asked about the commotion outside, Dan Wusung calmly dismisses it as nothing. He sits by the bedside as the leader admits his health is failing under immense stress. Lee Seongmin reaches out, remarking on how much Dan Wusung has changed and questioning if it's really him. Despite his doubts, the leader smiles warmly, expressing his relief at seeing him well. Dan Wusung confirms he is fine, but internally finds this fatherly affection deeply strange. A flashback reveals his past as a lonely orphan who never knew what having a father was like. The unexpected kindness stirs a painful memory, bringing a tear to his stoic eye. Dan Wusung accesses the memories of the original Lee Jin-yeon, recalling how he once viewed his father. A flashback reveals a towering, protective father figure holding his young son's hand against a bright sun. In the boy's memory, his father was an immense and great man, a symbol of unwavering strength. The memory fades, contrasting sharply with the present as Dan Wusung holds his father's now frail hand. He internally questions when this once great man became so small and withered by sickness. With a look of grim determination, Dan Wusung offers his father a solemn reassurance. He calmly states that the only thing needed is to eliminate the root cause of his father's stress. The leader is taken aback by his son's cold solution, but Dan Wusung confidently promises to handle it. A sinister smile plays on his lips, leaving his father to wonder at the unsettling change in his son. The sun rises on a new day, hinting that Dan Wusung's plans are already underway. The Una Merchant Group conference is in full swing, with the company's top brass gathered for the important meeting. Seated among them is Uang Hu, the guard squad leader and the very man Dan Wusung knows is a traitor. Uang Hu's subordinates whisper in surprise, pointing out the unexpected arrival of the eldest son. Dan Wusung sits with an unbothered and commanding presence, his arms crossed as he observes the proceedings. The other attendees are visibly confused, questioning what the family's former outcast is doing at such a high-level meeting. Uang Hu smirks with condescension, believing Dan Wusung is merely desperate to secure his position. Huaiyan attempts to move the meeting forward, asking if anyone has a differing opinion on the current matter. Seizing the opportunity, Uang Hu raises his hand, confidently interrupting the discussion. He slyly offers to recommend a personal guard for Dan Wusung, plotting to place a spy by his side. Nearby members quietly express their disdain, noting Uang Hu's relentless ambition to fill the group with his own people. Uang Hu is so startled by the response that he shatters his teacup in his hand. He quickly feigns clumsiness, claiming his hand slipped, but the tension in the room is undeniable. Dan Wusung offers a chillingly insincere apology, his smirk revealing he knows exactly what he's doing. Recovering, Uang Hu challenges the room, asking if anyone dares to oppose his recommendation. He scans the silent executives with a smug look, certain that his authority remains unchallenged. But just as he assumes victory, a single hand raises from across the room, belonging to Dan Wusung. With a dead serious expression, the eldest son announces that he, for one, has complaints. Dan Wusung rises from his seat, declaring he has a counter-suggestion of his own. He points directly at the traitor, proposing the immediate dismissal of guard squad leader Uang Hu. The room erupts in silent shock as Uang Hu and his cronies stare in utter disbelief. Uang Hu's men laugh off the proposal, mockingly praising their leader's commitment to the group. Dan Wusung lets out a hearty laugh, thoroughly amused by their foolish defense of the traitor. The guard squad leader scoffs, arrogantly questioning if Dan Wusung truly believes he has the power to fire him. Uang Hu venomously suggests that being bedridden has made the eldest son forget his place. A chilling smile spreads across Dan Wusung's face as he challenges that very notion. He suddenly unleashes a devastating punch, his fist glowing with a formidable blue aura. The table explodes into a shower of debris from the sheer force of his blow. Uang Hu is sent flying backwards, utterly unprepared for the sudden display of power. The traitor stares up in disbelief, a bead of sweat tracing his face as he realizes his mistake. Dan Wusung looms over him, clenching his fist, and asserts his absolute ownership of the entire merchant group. Huaiyan hurries after Dan Wusung, questioning if his sole purpose for attending was to fire the guard captain. The eldest son halts his brisk pace, turning to address his concerned subordinate directly. He poses a chilling question about what happens when a martial artist from the Jianghu is underestimated. With a knowing smirk, he reveals that the one making such a foolish assumption is always the first to be devoured. Dan Wusung then directs Huaiyan's attention to the current, precarious state of their own merchant group. He gestures towards the courtyard below, pointing out that the process of being devoured has already begun. Huaiyan's eyes widen in dawning horror as he sees just how deeply the Ouyang clan has infiltrated their ranks. Clasping Huaiyan's shoulder, Dan Wusung tells him to cast aside his worries. He confidently declares that, as the older brother, he will take care of the entire problem himself. Left to ponder this promise, Huaiyan sits with a mix of confusion and newfound hope, trusting his brother's capabilities. Huaiyan watches from the balcony, questioning his brother's aggressive methods for solving the problem. In the courtyard below, Dan Wusung is surrounded by Uang Hu's enraged men, their swords drawn. The guard's leader stares in disbelief, convinced the eldest son has finally lost his mind. A loyal guard steps forward to defend his master, demanding the traitors lower their weapons. Dan Wusung calmly holds up a hand, stopping his own men from interfering in the standoff. The loyal guard's eyes narrow, acknowledging the sheer insolence of the opposing faction. With a condescending smirk, Dan Wusung grabs his own hair, feigning exasperation at their behavior. He coldly questions their audacity for daring to draw their swords against their employer. The loyal guard mutters in disbelief, certain these foolish men have a death wish. Watching from a distance, Uang Hu smirks, deciding this chaos is fair compensation for his earlier humiliation. Dan Wusung offers a mock apology for ruining the traitor's well-laid retirement plans, leaving Uang Hu confused. He reveals he knows Uang Hu hired a physician to eliminate him during his recuperation. The eldest son continues, explaining how the traitor also instigated a feud between his younger brothers. This internal strife was designed to cause their father's collapse, clearing the path for a takeover. Dan Wusung lays out the entire scheme, detailing how Uang Hu planned to use one of the sons as a pawn. By manipulating a single heir, the traitor could have seized control of the entire merchant group from the shadows. Uang Hu burst into condescending laughter, dismissing the incredibly accurate accusation as a delusion. But Dan Wusung takes a confident step forward, his expression turning deadly serious. He reveals the critical flaw in the plan. The assassin meant to kill him was the one who ended up dead. Dan Wusung declares that this unforeseen failure was the precise moment Uang Hu's fate was sealed. Dan Wusung casually informs the traitor that the assassin was dealt with in a single, merciful strike. He turns away, chiding Uang Hu for his sloppy takeover attempt and promising to bill him for the damages. Enraged by the mockery, Uang Hu unleashes his own formidable power, his fist crackling with a violet aura. The eldest son's eyes narrow with cold precision, having perfectly predicted his opponent's reckless move. Uang Hu lunges forward, convinced his attack will end the arrogant heir's life. Unflinching, Dan Wusung meets the assault with a counterpunch, his own fist radiating a brilliant blue light. Their powers clash in a spectacular explosion, the courtyard erupting from the sheer force of their collision. The traitor recoils in agony, his hand shattered from the overwhelming impact of the blow. Uang Hu stares in disbelief, realizing with horror that the sickly heir is a master of lightning-based martial arts. Before the traitor can recover, Dan Wusung moves in to press his advantage, ready to end the confrontation. The loyal guards are stunned, realizing their supposedly weak master just blocked the guard captain's powerful strike. Dan Wusung mockingly rubs his neck, questioning the wisdom of attacking a man fresh from his sickbed. With a smug grin, he then suggests that perhaps an official duel would make the assault acceptable. Uang Hu seethes with rage, infuriated by the heir's newfound and overconfident arrogance. The traitor capitalizes on the moment, declaring an official duel to the stunned onlookers. He looks on with a sinister sneer, believing he has successfully cornered the eldest son. But Dan Wusung clenches his fists, flatly rejecting the traitor's terms for the duel. He raises his fists into a fighting stance, escalating the challenge to a life-or-death battle. Uang Hu draws his sword, condescendingly praising the heir's rapid improvement and impressive training. The traitor trails off, however, preparing to demonstrate that the young master's skills are still insufficient. Uang Hu lunges forward, convinced his superior experience will guarantee his victory. But the eldest son easily evades the attack with a swift kick, mocking the traitor's empty boast. The guard captain stares in disbelief, stunned by the heir's impossibly fast reaction. Dan Wusung scoffs at the notion of experience, his fist crackling with immense electrical energy. He declares the traitor is far too green to lecture him, unleashing a devastating wave of power. The blast sends Uang Hu hurtling backward, completely overwhelmed by the attack. Reeling from the blow, the traitor struggles to understand the source of this incredible strength. With a confident smirk, Dan Wusung prepares to show him what a real gap in power looks like. Activating his enlightened mobility art, he vanishes in a blur of blue light, closing the gap instantly. His fist meets the traitor's blade, the sheer force of the impact making Uang Hu recoil in pain. Dan Wusung unleashes a flurry of attacks, overwhelming the traitor with a relentless offensive. Uang Hu struggles to block, sensing a terrifying and unnatural power behind the heir's strikes. The traitor realizes this isn't the clumsy technique of a mere beginner. Instead, he feels the overwhelming pressure of a true martial arts grandmaster. Pushed back by the sheer force, Uang Hu can't believe the power he's facing. The traitor's men cheer from the sidelines, mistakenly believing their captain is about to win. Refusing to accept defeat, Uang Hu channels his energy into a desperate final sword technique. His pride shattered, he furiously rejects the idea of losing to a mere brat. The guard captain lunges with all his might, only for Dan Wusung to vanish in a flash of movement. Uang Hu's eyes widen in horror as he realizes the eldest son has already moved behind him. With a cold farewell, Dan Wusung prepares to deliver the final decisive blow. He slams his electrified fist into the back of the traitor's head with unstoppable force. A massive pillar of blue energy erupts from the impact, blasting Uang Hu into the sky. The loyal guards can only stare in utter shock, their minds unable to process the incredible display. Miles away, the merchant group leader and his attendant notice the massive disturbance from their window. The attendant nervously asks his master about the source of the commotion, but the leader simply clenches his fists, sensing his son's involvement in the conflict. A proud, knowing smile spreads across his face, pleased with his heir's hidden strength. As Dan Wusung stands over the defeated traitor, his father realizes the boy has mastered martial arts. The eldest son looks down at his fallen enemy with an expression of pure, cold contempt. The defeated traitor lies broken on the ground, his body twitching as he struggles to speak. The traitor's men cry out in alarm, rushing to their fallen captain's side. A subordinate cradles his captain and glares defiantly, but the eldest son coldly challenges him to a fight. Unexpectedly, one of the traitor's own men steps forward to testify that the duel was completely fair. He then issues a grim warning. Any further challenges from the Ouyang clan will be met in kind by the merchant group. The loyal retainers are shocked by this bold declaration, realizing it could lead to all-out war. The eldest son, however, remains unfazed, accepting that he was never destined for a life without enemies. He makes a simple vow, promising to repay kindness with kindness and settle every grudge without fail. He then declares that he will shoulder all responsibility, ensuring the merchant group is not blamed for his personal battles. The loyal retainer cries out in protest, warning his master that such a declaration is dangerously reckless. Dan Wusung counters his retainer, boldly claiming the Yunhai merchant group as his own. He clarifies that it also belongs to his father, linking his actions to his family's legacy. The eldest son then includes the loyal guards who stood by him when he was considered a nobody. He even acknowledges the humble stable hands who showed him simple kindness. With his point made, he declares that the true merchant group will not be manipulated by traitors. He then delivers the final verdict, coldly firing all of Uang Hu's remaining followers. The loyal servants are stunned into silence by their master's decisive and sweeping command. Uang Hu's men can only stare in disbelief and fury at being unceremoniously dismissed. Seeing no other choice, the traitors carry their fallen captain away, leaving the grounds in defeat. Dan Wusung now stands as the undisputed authority, his loyal followers looking on from below. The loyal retainer is left speechless, struggling to comprehend the sudden shift in power. Some of the guards begin to celebrate loudly until they are quickly silenced by their comrades. Their brief joy turns to shame as they realize they did nothing while their master fought alone. With the situation handled, Dan Wusung calls for the chief administrator, who nervously snaps to attention. His first order as the new authority is a simple but telling one, to procure a high-grade elixir. He reasons that since he's shouldering the group's burdens, he has more than earned its support.
The administrator eagerly agrees, delighted to serve a master who has decisively proven his worth.
Dan Wusung lays out his plans, tasking him with hiring new guards to replace the traitors. As the sun sets on the estate, it marks the end of an old era and the dawn of a new one. The eldest son already has candidates in mind, thinking of a scarred man flanked by two imposing figures. The administrator questions the eldest son's choice, specifically asking about a man named Li Jinian. The story flashes back a few days to the scarred man's first day at the Yunhai merchant group. Dan Wusung is seen taking a late-night stroll through the estate with his new acquaintance. He casually asks his companion Li Jinian if he's had a meal yet, addressing him as vice captain. A nearby stable hand mistakenly answers, explaining he's been too busy working since dawn to eat. Li Jinian observes the brief exchange, a thoughtful expression on his face. A dark, calculating smile spreads across Dan Wusung's face as an idea begins to form. He then looks down from a balcony, his gaze fixed on a group of guards in the courtyard. Below, Ouyang Hu's men are seen goofing off, completely neglecting their duties during work hours. With a fist slammed against the railing, Dan Wusung resolves to purge the group of all such freeloaders. Dan Wusung clenches his fist, explaining the core of the problem to his new vice captain. He states that with the traitors gone, he now needs to find worthy replacements. Li Jinian listens intently, beginning to understand the young master's true intentions. The scene shifts to a lavish entertainment house, the destination Dan Wusung has in mind. Inside, the establishment is filled with rowdy men gambling and carousing without a care. A particularly smug-looking man enjoys a game of mahjong, puffing on a cigar. Two patrons spot the newcomer, with one correcting his friend that it's the Yunhai group's young master. Dan Wusung enters the den with his hands clasped behind his back, radiating an unfamiliar authority. He scans the room with a cold, unimpressed gaze, his presence immediately shifting the atmosphere. The smug gambler recognizes him, cynically anticipating another display of wasteful spending from the pushover heir. A hulking guard armed with a trident stands watch outside a private room. The bouncer is startled as Dan Wusung appears before him, his presence completely unexpected. He mockingly asks if the sucker is back to waste more money, but the young master coldly rejects his familiar touch. Confused by the sharp insult, the guard is left speechless as Dan Wusung commands him to open the door. The young master shoves the indignant guard aside, refusing to be blocked any longer. He steps into a private room where the very men he came to see are waiting around a table. The man known as the poisonous fox, Chul Myung-ho, looks up, acknowledging the young master's entrance. Chul Myung-ho cheekily remarks that the recent period of recuperation seems to have suited the young master well. Two bald, imposing figures, the brothers Yuk Jinbo and Yuk Myungbo, offer a much more curt welcome. The poisonous fox chides his companions for their lack of warmth, reminding them of their guest's recent recovery. Dan Wusung leans in, listening to Chul Myung-ho's flimsy apology and his claim of friendship. A flashback reveals that Lee Jinyan and Chul Myung-ho were indeed childhood acquaintances. Their history, however, was a dark one defined by Myung-ho's constant abuse and financial exploitation. Back in the present, the young master cynically reflects on this twisted definition of friendship. Myung-ho slides a bag of coins forward, encouraging the heir to indulge himself after his long absence. The poisonous fox then admits he was actually eager to fleece the pushover again, offering a grand celebration. Annoyed by the young master's stoic silence, Myung-ho aggressively confronts him. Dan Wusung coolly replies that he is simply thinking, prompting an impatient response. His gaze turns lethal as he reveals he's deciding whether or not to end Myung-ho's life right there. His internal monologue clarifies that his real targets are the twin brothers, the true muscle behind the operation. He deduces that the powerful brothers are merely serving as common thugs under Myung-ho's command. A predatory grin spreads across his face as he decides their talent is too valuable to rot in such a place. Having made up his mind, he calmly acknowledges Myung-ho's impatient outburst. Instead of backing down, he confidently extends his hand and makes his first demand, the vault key. The trio stares in stunned silence, utterly bewildered by the young master's audacity. Myung-ho scoffs in disbelief, questioning if this is just a bizarre way of asking for more money. With a knowing smirk, Dan Wusung agrees, stating that for now he'll settle for cash. He then begins to calculate a bill, listing every nyang extorted from him, plus interest and medical fees. After a moment of thought, he lands on a final figure, demanding 100,000 nyang as fair compensation. Seeing Myung-ho's shocked expression, the young master briefly wonders if he's actually gone too easy on him. The poisonous fox stifles a laugh, finding the young master's demand utterly absurd. His composure breaks as he erupts into a fit of mocking laughter. He condescendingly pats the young master's shoulder, sarcastically praising his newfound math skills. His amusement fades into contempt as he grips the table, dismissing the demand as madness. Myung-ho smugly boasts that the vault contains far more than cash, holding a fortune in gold and jewels. He leans in close, his tone turning menacing as he declares that none of it is for the young master. Straightening up, he offers a patronizing loan, questioning the strange request for the vault key. Dan Wusung remains stoic and silent, letting the insults wash over him. Myung-ho's face darkens with rage, his patience finally snapping at the silent treatment. He seethes, unable to comprehend the young master's transformation from a fragile patient to an audacious challenger. Myung-ho explodes with rage, grabbing the young master and reminding him just who he's dealing with. The young master remains utterly calm, letting out a quiet sigh in the face of the outburst. The poisonous fox leans in, his face twisting with malice as he questions the young master's sanity. Fed up with the silence, he orders his enforcers to teach the heir a painful lesson. The hulking brother immediately complies, slamming the young master's head onto the table. Pinned against the wood, a flicker of genuine annoyance finally crosses Dan Wusung's face. Suddenly, the enforcer's confident expression shifts to one of shock and confusion. With a chilling grin, Dan Wusung reveals he was trying to be kind, but his patience has run out. He effortlessly shatters the thug's grip, leaving Myung-ho stunned by the display of strength. In a flash of movement, he sends the massive man flying, proving he is no longer a pushover. The massive enforcer crashes through a screen, his brother and Myung-ho watching in utter disbelief. The remaining brother, Yuk Myungbo, grits his teeth in fury, preparing to avenge his fallen twin. But the young master is faster, launching a devastating kick before the thug can even react. His foot connects squarely, sending the second brother hurtling backwards with immense force. He follows up instantly, stomping down with a foot charged with crackling blue energy. The enforcer's face contorts in agony as the powerful blow lands, stunning him completely. Without a moment's pause, Dan Wusung spins, delivering another powerful kick to neutralize the threat. After dispatching the second brother, he pauses, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. His internal thoughts reveal that the brothers were even stronger than he had anticipated. Despite the brutal assault, the first brother begins to push himself up from the floor, proving his incredible resilience. He internally marvels at their ability to stand back up after his brutal assault. The young master recalls that he specifically broke their wrists and ankles to immobilize them. Yet the twin enforcers glare back with pure defiance, completely unfazed by their injuries. A pleased grin spreads across his face, recognizing them as truly formidable fighters. Fueled by rage, the brothers launch a furious, synchronized assault. Unintimidated, the young master calmly prepares to face their combined might. He intercepts their attack with a blindingly fast counter-maneuver. The enforcers halt in confusion, realizing their opponent has suddenly disappeared from sight. Before they can react, he reappears behind them in an incredible display of speed. He decisively neutralizes them by smashing their heads together, just as he had anticipated. He smirks, declaring the brothers are far too valuable to be left to rot in this place. A brutal impact renders the twin enforcers completely unconscious. He issues a final, chilling warning for the defeated twins to stay down. With his enforcers neutralized, the young master turns his attention to the last man standing. Myung-ho can only stare in utter disbelief, sweat beading on his face. With a deceptively pleasant smile, he calmly informs Myung-ho that now it's just the two of them.